What's going on there, guys? My name is Matt, or Chewy as most of you will know me as, and welcome back to part 2 of 4 of my video series on the Microsoft Flight Simulator Global Preview event. In this video, I'm going to be talking about my first impressions of the simulator and also giving you guys a rundown of what happened during the event. In the background is footage directly taken from Microsoft Flight Simulator. Please be aware that all of the footage shown is pre-alpha and was recorded in September 2019. So, the itinerary for the day. What actually happened during the Microsoft Flight Simulator Global Preview event? Well, at 8:15 AM, we were asked to meet down in the lobby area of the hotel, where we were picked up by bus after checking in and taken round to the Rainier Flight Service Centre at KRNT Airport, just round the corner from the hotel. Once we arrived, we were greeted to the event by various Microsoft developers and then given a breakfast before the first presentation of the day. This presentation lasted about 90 minutes and had various elements to it. Different developers from Asobo Studios and Microsoft came up and talked about their individual respective areas of expertise within the simulator. Topics in this presentation ranged from aerodynamics to cockpit details, weather systems, and the overall visuals in the simulator. I'll provide more details on what specifically was talked about during the presentation later on in the video. After the presentation had concluded, we were led into another room where we were able to get our first hands-on experience with the simulator. Each individual were given their own personalized booth, and this included a computer with monitor, keyboard, mouse, a Cytec Pro flight yoke, and the Thrustmaster TPR rudder pedals. The simulator was already up and running, so all we needed to do was load into the simulator to get our first time flying in the sim. After we had about an hour or so to gauge our initial impressions of the simulator, we were led back into the room where the presentation had earlier been conducted for a 30-minute question and answer session with some of the developers from Microsoft and Asobo Studios. Lunch followed this, and then afterwards we were free to go back into the booth area to go and get as much hands-on time with the simulator as we wanted to do. At 3 PM, I was asked to meet down into the lobby area of the building as it was time to go on a 90-minute Cessna flight with a tour around Seattle. We were told in advance that we would be having a tour of Seattle, but we were not taught that we would actually have our own instructor and it would only be the two of us individually in a Cessna 172 Skyhawk. This was my first ever time flying an aircraft and my first ever time in a propeller aircraft, and I was very, very excited. The entirety of that flight will be uploaded as part 4 of this series. Once safely back on the ground, it was time to have even more hands-on time with the simulator, and this was a really great opportunity as the day wrapped up to chat with some of the developers and give them some of our feedback on what we thought, ask tiny little details that we were looking at when we were picking up either bugs or awesome features within the simulator, and just generally be able to have a chit-chat around with everybody else at the event. A lot of the other journalists and media outlets were able to have private interviews with some of the developers during this time. However, that was not offered to me as an option, which was totally fine as I was more than happy just playing in the simulator. At 6 PM, the event had concluded. The bus came to pick us up and took us back to the hotel. So, onto the stuff you've been waiting for, my initial impressions of the simulator. I could be here for the next few hours discussing all of the things that I discovered within the simulator. However, I'll try to condense it down for you all. First of all, the visuals. Well, I think you get the answer to that with the footage that's being played in the background here. I've never quite seen anything like it in my life. With 2 petabytes of data being live streamed down from Bing Maps, and then various layers of Azure data being streamed over the top of that, there is no shortage of amazing things to see within the simulator, no matter where you travel. The entirety of the world is modeled, and so I guess this kind of makes Microsoft Flight Simulator the first true Earth simulator within its own rights. One of the first things that I saw quite a lot of people doing was to try and find their home, and this was actually a much easier task than I imagined it to be. I not only found the individual house that I live in, but whilst flying over the top of my small little market town in Oxfordshire, I flew over the top of my school and the school fields where the football pitches were, where I used to play sport. This was a really crazy moment for me, and it was so lovely to be able to share it with some of the developers who were watching over my shoulder as my jaw dropped to the floor. This level of detail continues throughout the entirety of the world, which is something to really be marveled at. Now, to get this kind of data from the Bing Maps and all of the Azure data as well, there are actually 3 options that are going to be coming out for us simmers. The number one is almost like a live streaming service, where depending on our internet speed, we'll be able to download the textures into the simulator. And the higher the internet quality, the higher the quality of the textures in the simulator. For those of you who don't have a very good internet connection, or even virtually no internet connection at all, fear not, option number 2 is for you. There will be a completely offline mode within Microsoft Flight Simulator, where obviously the textures aren't quite as crisp as the other 2 options. I really like the approach to this, as it gives lots of different variables and possibilities for everybody's needs within the sim. Weather comes next, and Microsoft Flight Simulator provided me with the first ever time of being absolutely petrified flying into a storm in the simulator. In the current simulators, we do have things like wind shear, turbulence, and all sorts of different weather events modelled. However, they compare nothing to the scale of what I saw in my 3 hours of game time within this new simulator. There's a variety of different pre-selected weather modes that you can choose from, or the option that I'll be using the most, which is the live weather mode. Microsoft have been able to get satellite data along with other sources to provide real-time live weather updates within the sim. One experience that was the real standout for me was being able to actually see rain falling from a cloud in the distance in front of you, then flying towards that cell and slowly being able to see the water droplets form on the cockpit windows. The turbulence certainly feels like a lot of time has been put into the development of it, and this leads on nicely to the aerodynamics. Within Microsoft Flight Simulator, the team at Asobo Studios have rewritten the code for the aerodynamics of the aircraft from the ground up. Individual flight control surfaces are all accurately modelled, and the attention to detail didn't go amiss. For example, when flying over terrain and say your left wing is the only section of the aircraft that passes over a heightened area, you will feel that side of the aircraft react to this change. It's something difficult to describe verbally and much better appreciated when you experience it for yourself. Onto the cockpits. We were only able to fly 3 aircraft in the simulator: the Cessna 172 Skyhawk, the Robin DR400 and the TBM 930. All of the switches and buttons are in the correct place and functional, which marks a dramatic improvement from the default aircraft of FSX days. Once again, the attention to detail was immaculate. Cockpit details were scratched and dirty, instrument panels looked worn, and each aircraft felt like it had its own personality. The fancy new TBM 930 certainly felt a lot more high-tech and flashy than an old Robin DR400. Texturing for all of these aircraft included physically based rendering, or PBR, and the lighting and shadows reflected the atmospheric changes as we changed the time of day in the simulator. Talking about time of day, there is a slider included that allows simmers to change the time of day without any delay to ensure for that perfect screenshot. So, what about the sceneries, both airports and city details? For the most part, the default airports were of a standard not seen before in any other simulator. Being very familiar with the layout of London Heathrow, I instantly loaded into there to see what was included. I was happily surprised to see the iconic tower, Terminal 5, and various other real-world attributes of the airport included. I wasn't able to check out how accurate the taxiways and famous named holding places around London Heathrow were, but they seemed to be perfectly suitable considering it was all part of the default package. I next loaded into the famous Innsbruck airport in Austria to find the terminal buildings were not accurate to the real-life counterpart. There were also no jetways included at any of the sceneries I tested. This being said, it has to be taken into account that we were playing a pre-alpha build of the simulator. Monuments in cities were easily spotted and very well modelled, a lot of which you can see for yourselves in the footage shown in this video. Altogether, the package of the Bing Map photoreal scenery data, the multiple layers of Azure data for autogen, the weather system and its complexity for fine details, the aerodynamics that means simmers really get a good feel for how their aircraft is performing, The default scenery providing a perfectly acceptable level of detail and accuracy, and the intricacy of the cockpits make for a complete package with no shortness of wow moments. Something not shown in any of the video footage, but one thing that I really want to mention was the inventive new toolbar that can be accessed in the sim. By holding the mouse cursor near the top middle of the screen, a toolbar appeared with various different options to click on. These included things like checklists, weather and time of day adjustments, sim settings, plus more. The best part about this in-sim toolbar is that it was customizable, and so we were able to remove or add sections depending on our individual need for them. As mentioned, Microsoft Flight Simulator now comes with a comprehensive checklist system for the default aircraft included. Not only can you click through a checklist when learning an aircraft for the first time, but you can even have the camera pan to the next item around the cockpit that needs attention. And if you're really lazy, the simulator can do all of the hard work for you. This will be unbelievably useful for newcomers to the flight simulation world. As with most other things, these checklists are purely optional and can be completely switched off for more advanced users. The main menu screen and subsequent settings and scenario screens all had a really great UI to them and were very easy to navigate. When choosing where to fly in the sim, you can now select a departure and arrival airport, and the simulator will instantly calculate a route from A to B with waypoints that can be loaded directly into your aircraft once loaded into the sim. A really cool addition, I think. You don't just have to spawn at airports either. There is now an option to spawn your aircraft at points of interest, which proved to be great fun after I chose to spawn 500 feet above the Statue of Liberty in New York and was able to fly right over the city in no time at all. A lot of my Twitch.tv viewers have been asking me about the performance in the sim and whether there were any stutters, low frames, or long loading times. I personally had very few problems with only a few split-second stutters and nothing more. I did have a peek into the settings section to see most of the graphics options were turned up to a very high setting. We weren't told the PC specs of the system we were playing on. However, through the side window of the PC case, we could all see the GTX 2080 Ti text across the graphics card. We were also not given any details about recommended PC specs for when the simulator releases publicly. A question that myself and a lot of other people have asked was about the possibility of different seasons being accurately represented in the simulator. Microsoft and Asobo were both very quiet on this topic and only stated that season possibilities would not be an option at launch. Let's hope it is something that we see become a part of the sim in the future. So, improvements. What went or looked wrong? To be honest with you, not a whole lot from what I spotted. Again, considering the sim is in pre-alpha, it was surprisingly stable and bug-free. At the moment, aircraft shadows only reflect off of terrain, not water, but the team are already aware and working on this bug. The camera system was a far cry away from the old FSX one, but still felt quite clunky to me, and adjustments had to be made by going into a settings page, which paused the sim. The real-world weather system also needs some work. This was evident when I decided to take the TBM 930 up to 30,000 feet above Las Vegas, and the aircraft began to violently oscillate, as one would only expect to see in a disastrous weather event like a hurricane. Third-party content is another big talking point at the moment. Microsoft are well aware that the community has relied upon third-party developers to keep our current simulators alive. Microsoft have stated that they are already in discussion with a plethora of developers, and so let's hope that we can see our favourite add-ons ported over to this sim sometime after launch. I do feel that certain products may not be needed whatsoever, as the default package in Microsoft Flight Simulator provides more than enough for so many aspects to it. It's impossible to predict, but I feel like products such as Orbex True Earth, Rex Skyforce, and Active Sky Cloud Art may be left behind due to them simply not being needed. This is a good point to mention that SimConnect will be included in Microsoft Flight Simulator, which will hopefully mean that porting certain third-party add-ons will be relatively easy. We hope. I had a really great discussion with the developers at Asobo about the concept of using Microsoft Flight Simulator as a purely visual engine for home cockpit builders. In the SimFest 747 simulator that I regularly visit, we use the PSX 747-400 as the simulator itself, and prepared is simply used for the visuals. If Microsoft were able to make these types of home cockpit sims compatible, it could open up a whole new door of possibilities. Microsoft are also very fond of VR, and although little was said on the topic, I would be very surprised if we did not see VR support being introduced at some point in the future. So, to conclude, I came into this event worried that we would be spoon-fed information, that we would only get a handful of preloaded scenarios to fly in, and that we would only be talking to PR staff who read off of a script. Oh, were my worries put to bed. Everybody at the event were more than open to questions and feedback. You can see that they have really put their heart and soul into this project, and were just as excited to share it with us as we were to trying it ourselves. Microsoft Flight Simulator feels alive. I truly believe it has the potential to be the simulator that we didn't know we needed. The amount of effort, dedication, and attention to detail is remarkable, and it really feels like the whole development team is on the same page, reading from the same hymn sheet, and all striving towards a common goal. I think I can best sum it up with a quote from Frugal Sim, who, on discovering how amazing the weather cells are, paused the sim, looked over to me and said 3 words. Okay, Microsoft wins. Well, there may have been a 4th word, but it was an expletive, so I thought I'd best not repeat it. I cannot thank the staff at Microsoft, Asobo Studios, Rainier Flight Service, and Assembly Incorporated enough for inviting me out to this event. It was only a decade ago I was sat on my first ever PC doing air shows in the default Extra 300 within FSX. Something I've still got a recording of and may upload if I ever feel the need to embarrass myself thoroughly. Make sure to look out for part 3 and 4 of this series of videos about the global preview event, where I will upload the entirety of the 30-minute question and answer session with the developers, and also let you guys join me in the cockpit of a Cessna 172 Skyhawk as I fly an aircraft for the first time. Thanks for watching.